This episode is brought to you by the Gifted Learning Lab, which provides resources and coaching for parents who want to feel more confident raising their intense or sensitive, gifted, or twice-exceptional kid.
Focus on what is causing the behavior, the environment, sensorially, whatever it is, And so if they have actually control and are actually given agency over the thing that's hard, and we take a moment, we ask, what would make this easier? Mm-hmm. A lot of times they have the greatest answers.
The layering of cognitive ability with another type of neurodivergence or disability is called Twice-Exceptionality. How important is early identification and evaluation for Twice-Exceptionality? And what are some common myths about twice-exceptional people? In this episode, we're welcoming back Julie Skolnick. She's the author of Gifted and Distractible, Understanding, Supporting, and Advocating for Your Twice-Exceptional Child. Julie's insights aim to empower parents who are starting on this journey with their children. That's straight ahead on episode 201. I'm Emily Kircher-Morris, and this is the Neurodiversity Podcast.
What is neurodiversity? You see the world differently.
Autism spectrum.
Gifted.
Complexities that are inherently inside.
ADHD.
Dysgraphia.
Tourette's.
All brains are different.
You are exactly what this world needs.
This is the
Neurodiversity
Podcast.
Before the interview, one quick thing. I wanted to mention an opportunity to my listeners. The Neurodiversity Podcast has partnered with Jessica Williams, a doctoral candidate at University of Denver, to help her conduct a research study on the lived experiences of gifted women ADHDers. She is working to share the stories of these twice-exceptional women by raising their voices and giving them main character energy. The study will take place over Zoom interview calls. If you meet these 3 criteria, you may qualify to participate. You need to be older than 18 and medically diagnosed with ADHD. You also need to have been identified as gifted in school or have a full-scale IQ over 120. This score is sometimes called FSIQ. Eligible participants will be asked to complete 2 60-minute Zoom interviews and a follow-up review of their data. Every participant will receive a $50 gift card to Amazon for completing the study. For more information, follow the link in the show notes. At this time, she is seeking participants with any subtype of ADHD, but specifically needs those who are diagnosed ADHD predominantly hyperactive type to ensure she has a sampling of all 3 types of ADHD. If you are or know someone who may meet her eligibility criteria, please contact her. You can find her contact information in the show notes. Okay, my conversation with Julie Skolnick is up in just a minute.
Previously on the Neurodiversity Podcast.
Okay, yes, you had these plans for your day, yes, but just right now, you're going to sit down. What are you going to do? Let's just put it on a piece of paper so we don't have to look at the whole big list until later, and then that can be really helpful. And sometimes that list says, open document, find form, fill out form, question 1 right now. It doesn't matter.
I'm sure other people can relate to this, but I know when I make a list for myself, and I live on lists, I will go through, and first of all, I'll write down the things I've already done just so I can check them off.
Yep.
But I will also break down all of the steps. So I'm going to put the laundry in the washer. I'm going to move it to the dryer. But it kind of just helps to I guess maybe keep me on track a little bit, but also reminding me that I am making progress even if I'm not at that finish line yet.
Exactly.
That's episode 179. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm welcoming Julie Skolnick as a return guest today. Julie is the founder of With Understanding Comes Calm and author of the new book, Gifted and Distractible, Understanding, Supporting, and Advocating for Your Twice-Exceptional Child. Julie, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily. I'm excited to be here again.
For those in our audience who might be unfamiliar, twice-exceptional or multi-exceptional refers to a person who is both cognitively gifted and has another diagnosis or identification layered on top of that, like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, any of those things that can obviously complicate things when we are raising or educating children who are twice exceptional. So, Julie, when I talk to parents, I know they are often uncertain, both about the process of seeking an evaluation and the benefits of doing so. How important do you think it is to identify twice-exceptionality?
So, great question. And frankly, I think everybody should figure out how their brain works. It informs everything we do and how we feel about ourselves. So I feel like having as a 2E adult or your child's evaluation to identify where their strengths and passions and interests lie, as well as where they struggle or trip up, is extraordinarily important. But there are caveats to that, because not just anybody can do an evaluation of a gifted or 2E person or child, because there is nuance, because the gift can mask the challenge can mask the gift. We need somebody who knows what they're looking at. And so, in fact, in the book, Gifted and Distractible, I actually have a list of questions to ask of potential evaluators to identify whether or not they actually really understand 2E, have worked with 2E. And as you said, Emily, 2E can mean a million different things. Mm-hmm. There's so many different learning differences that can be attendant with a gifted profile.
What are some of those questions that you feel like people should ask? What are some of the things to consider?
Yeah. So first of all have you heard of 2E?
Yeah.
Or if you don't want to be that direct, you can say, so what percentage of the population of people that you evaluate are twice exceptional? And, you might ask more about those twice, like, how do you adjust when you are evaluating a twice exceptional person or a twice exceptional child? You might ask, what are the suggestions that you make, or how do you help parents find resources to support their twice exceptional child? You might ask, what are the superpowers that you identify in 2E children? That's so important, because we think in this country and many countries that we are a diagnose and fix process, when really it should be an identify and celebrate process.
Yeah, that's kind of the whole idea of the depathologizing so many of these labels and recognizing, sure, they come with struggles. That's fine. We can recognize that and understand that. But also the strengths that come along with it can't be ignored.
For sure. And in fact, I'll go even one step further and say that unfortunately, many responses by parents and educators to 2E children's, quote, behavior is, sorry, we can't really do enrichment or acceleration or any of the cool stuff until you get your behavior under control. And it's ironic, because I know you know so well, Emily, but if you give all the good stuff, then the behavior magically disappears.
Right.
Let's engage our kids. Let's make sure we're talking to their strengths and their passions and engaging those parts of them, so that actually when the hard stuff pops up, they have more resilience to deal with it, face it, and talk about it.
Yeah, I always kind of chuckle to myself a little bit back when I was working in the schools, and the response that you would get when asked for ideas about how to give some more challenge to students is, well, they have to show us that they can do all of these other little mundane, tedious pieces first before they can move on to that. And I'm like, well, they can show you that they can do those things if you give them the challenge, but asking them to do those little things was the stumbling block. That was where they would get stuck.
Exactly. Our people don't want to do the rote and the boring. I talk about, and there's a great image in the book, and actually not everybody knows this, but my oldest child did a lot of the illustrations in the book. And there's one illustration of the bucket of resilience. And I talk about, if your bucket of resilience is full, you're able to address things that are harder. So if you've just been, a lot of people say, let's do their like challenge area first in the morning because they're going to be way more able to pay attention. And it's like, no, give them the good stuff first, oil those gears and get them ready. In fact, every once in a while I have a client who, we know that sometimes 2E kids like to eat, brown food and brown food only, or white food, or food that isn't really all that adventuresome. And sometimes there are kids who start refusing to eat. And so I actually recommend, give them a little dessert first. Let's kind of lube up the works.
One of the quotes that I've seen you post on social media and all of these things, but I feel like it is so perfect, is for Twice Exceptional kids, the hard stuff is easy and the easy stuff is hard. Am I saying that correctly, or am I getting it reversed?
No. That's right. The hard stuff is easy and the easy stuff is hard. I had a client once, and this example, there's a lot of anecdotes, as you know, in the book. And this example, I just have such like a movie in my head about it. So I had a client she has a 7-year-old, and one day the 7-year-old came downstairs and he was in his pajamas and it was like morning time and there was like not a lot of things happened yet. And he just stamped his foot and he was like, gosh, why is life so hard? This little tiny body. And they were like, what's going on? What's wrong? And he was like, why do I have to get dressed? He was in the middle of like an epic Lego build. He was so in flow, but now it was time to deal with the morning routine. And it was like, I can't tell you how many of my clients, and whenever I speak to audiences, people are like, yes, how hard it is to get their kid to brush their teeth, to shampoo their hair, to like do these things that are for most people, for neurotypical people, just like you don't even think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That those little tasks. And I think sometimes as we learn more about neurodivergence and some of these different labels, we can kind of tease out some of those pieces. So, for example, finally, my son, who's twice exceptional and is 15 years old, was able to articulate that part of the reason he hates brushing his teeth is because he doesn't like the way it feels on his gums.
100%.
I had suspected that for a long time, but probably when he was very young, before I was really in this work quite as much as I am now, I was just like, this is defiance. This is like, why are we arguing about this? All of these little things.
Just get it done.
There is logic and reason behind most of those things if you can investigate it. But when you turn it into that power struggle, it just is really, you just don't get anywhere with it.
You don't get anywhere. And actually, it depletes their bucket of resilience. They pull harder. And we always say behavior is communication. What underlies that behavior? Like instead of focusing on the behavior, focus on what is causing the behavior, the environment, sensorily, whatever it is, And so for some kids, shampoo, maybe they need to wear gloves in the shower or have a clothespin on their nose or, maybe there's different toothpaste. But if they have actually control and are actually given agency over the thing that's hard, and we take a moment, we ask, what would make this easier? Mm-hmm. A lot of times they have the greatest answers.
Yeah. There's so much confusion about neurodivergence in general. I'm wondering if there are some myths or misunderstandings that you really find are prevalent that you would love to dispel about neurodivergence or twice exceptional people.
Yeah, I love that question. And actually, when you think about twice exceptional people, you have myths about giftedness, and then you have myths about just about every learning difference. Mm-hmm. Well, for giftedness, it's like if you're gifted in one area, you're gifted in all areas. People are gifted because their parents push them to be gifted, right? Of course, it's the parents' fault if they're not meeting their expectations. Or that, gifted kids don't get that they're different. That one, to me, is the biggest pain point because gifted kids do know that they're different. Mm-hmm. And twice exceptional falls within this umbrella, but I'm going to talk about some learning difference myths in a second too. But for gifted, it's, if they're not producing, then they must be lazy or don't care. Mm-hmm. That's like a very big, unfortunate assumption and myth. So I do a whole talk on the uncanny likeness of giftedness and ADHD. And there are a lot of myths around ADHD. I actually think ADHD is an incredible brain. I mentored actually just got married yesterday. I mentored this teenager when he was a teenager. And he used to say, Julie, I think ADHD is actually the more evolved mind. Like we can pay attention to so many things. Mm-hmm. And so ADHD, there's so many myths about ADHD and out of control and, all these horrible, terrible, awful things are going to happen to them. And they absolutely 100% always need to be on medication or have consequences or, all of these myths that are just untrue for dysgraphic or written expression challenged people. The assumption is that they're not trying hard enough. They don't care. They're lazy. They don't, they couldn't possibly have such a hard time with output. if they are such strong readers, for example. I do teacher team meetings. So I'll meet with, on behalf of a client with teacher teams. And I once had an advanced math teacher, and I kind of had the heads up from mom that this was probably going to happen. But the advanced math teacher, and I was so happy she asked me this, she said, wait a minute. Are you telling me gifted people can have slow processing speed? And it was like, yes, actually I am. And to talk about processing speed, frankly, that's a little bit of a bee in my bonnet, because I call it deeper processing speed. That if you're crunching more data, as our gifted and 2E folks do, of course it's going to take longer to consider all of the ramifications and outcomes. So those are just a bunch of different myths that I think about when I think about myths and try to dispel them.
Well, there's just so much stigma and assumption that goes along with everything in those areas that has been part of our educational system, the parenting methods that we've been taught, all of these different things. And so it really is a dismantling of a lot of those pieces to try to figure out how to support neurodivergent people.
It is why I have what I call the cycle for success, these 3 steps along the way in the process that I take clients through, and actually how the book is organized. It's in 3 parts. One is a deep understanding. How do we understand truly what gifted is beyond the assumption of smart? And how do we understand twice exceptional in general? And then how do you understand the child in front of you or the person in front of you? And then really deep practical strategies that work to fill that bucket of resilience and to help 2E people gain agency and control over their own lives and outcomes. And then advocacy. How do we collaborate? So all of that is really important and very specific to the 2E profile.
More in a minute.
If you're the parent of an intense or sensitive, gifted, or twice exceptional kiddo, the thing you want more than anything is to better understand and support them. Well, that's exactly what the Gifted Learning Lab from Dr. Danica Maddox does. Danica has supported gifted and 2E kids and families for over 15 years as a teacher, psychologist, assessment provider, award-winning researcher, and parent coach. Also, Danica is a former gifted kid, and she's raising an intense gifted preschooler. Through the Gifted Learning Lab resources, she helps you understand your kid's intensity from the inside out so you can connect with them during tough moments and understand how to help. The Gifted Learning Lab is committed to neurodiversity affirming parent approaches so you can work with your child's brain instead of against it. If you've tried other advice or strategies and you're out of ideas, why not connect with them through intuition, compassion, and humor with the Gifted Learning Lab? The result is a calmer and more connected family life. Start by taking a free email mini course about diffusing power struggles. If you feel stuck in endless negotiations or arguments, this free Power Struggles mini course could help. Find info at giftedlearninglab.com/power or find a link in the show notes. You know, I feel like we've alluded to some of these things already, but I want to talk specifically about some of the barriers that create roadblocks for twice exceptional kids and adults. Some of them are systemic and some might be more related to, individual needs. I'm wondering if you can just describe what some of those barriers are and how they change throughout the lifespan for 2E people from childhood through adulthood.
It's such a phenomenal question because, we don't outgrow our 2E-ness. So 2E adults are 2E kids all grown up. And really, frankly, it's a lot of the same mirroring of what's happening. So a 2E child may start out by demonstrating incredible abilities in certain areas, might demonstrate sensory sensitivities, and depending on the home environment, everything might be managed and this kid might be allowed to live in his or their passion place. Then they enter school. Maybe they run. I mean, I think about my now 20-year-old, and all 3 of my kids are 2E. My 20-year-old who, when he was 2 and he literally ran across the parking lot to get into school. He was so excited. And that lasted, a year. And by the 3s, that was over. And so there's this environmental experience where you're just shut down for being you, because when we look at overexcitabilities, which can be very positive, it's a terminology that really is an incorrect translation from the Polish. It should have been superstimulatabilities, but it's a very positive way to tap into the world in an intense way where you're affected and you affect the world in a bigger way. I actually think that therein lies most of the misunderstanding and the challenges for gifted and 2E people. So if you're intellectually overexcitable and you're shut down or not just not understood, but misunderstood and called like trying to be the center of attention, trying to show everybody how smart you are, when really you just have this organic rage to learn and you really want to know the stuff. And your teacher says, hey, you've asked enough questions. It's time to give somebody else a turn. That sounds really fair, but you've actually shut down the organic curiosity of this kid who then thinks, ooh, I did something wrong. And if you're emotionally overexcitable and your friends or your family don't get that you are just so genuinely empathetic to the point where you feel other people's feelings and you're told that you overreact or you're too much, then of course you're going to feel like there's something wrong with you. And when you don't receive the same sort of attention you can give back, that is really devastating to you and your self-confidence. If you have sensual or sensory overexcitabilities, just like you described your son with brushing his teeth, right? We think of brushing your teeth as like a basic, important, healthy thing to do. And there's lots of negative ramifications if you don't, socially and health-wise, right? So as we go through all of the psychomotor overexcitability, you need to move. So you need to move to learn. So sit and face forward and you're like jumping out of your skin, you're going to behave in a way that's going to bring on negative reactions and responses to somebody who doesn't understand what's going on. And last but not least is imaginational overexcitability. And these are 5 overexcitabilities. I know you know, Emily, but for your listeners, come from the psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski. If you're imaginationally overexcitable and it's such a great hack to doodle, but you're told that you're not paying attention, right? Okay, so what I'm talking about, what you're asking about is like, what are the pitfalls? Well, the pitfalls is totally being misunderstood and having parents who hopefully love you, but also don't get it. So they're just kind of like, just conform, just mask, just hide, do what they say so you can get to the good stuff type of thing. And you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound okay to me for so many reasons, not the least of which is my moral compass, which is extraordinarily strong, right? So that happens throughout life. Then you grow up and you're masking and you're exhausted because you come home from work that isn't meaningful because you're doing what you think you're supposed to do because people said you were so good at the thing, so you should do the thing. And then you're exhausted and unable to function and feeling really poorly about yourself. And when we feel poorly about ourselves, on the best day, we're not really great at social interaction because of all of the negative self-concept. So it really is this, unfortunately, fluid experience that occurs from the beginning, from the very beginning. And so a big part of my work, as I know is your work, is this positive reframe, this strength-based approach, and this deep understanding that no child or human wants to be annoying or misinterpreted or any of the other words that I don't like to say. Those assumptions. Yeah.
I know that you also do work with twice-exceptional adults.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about what you notice about what it's like for 2E kids who grow into 2E grownups.
Yeah. So I have this membership now called the Haystack for all the 2E adult needles, we call them. And it's really cute because they all write in their Discord channel, hey, needles, so we're finding the needles in the haystack. So I do have to say masking is a big deal. And masking can be an adaptive way to try to cope so long as you've done sort of that cost benefit analysis with yourself. But that is a really hard self-aware thing to do, especially if you didn't live your life understanding that you were doing it as a conscious choice. So there's a lot of masking. In the Haystack, inevitably, a member will get very emotional to say, I've even had somebody say, I don't know what's happening to my body. I've never felt this way before. And the group was like, I think you might not be masking for the first time. So there's that happening. Adults, there's a lot of loneliness. It's just, can I actually say all the words about the things that mean something to me or are important to me without somebody like glazing over or walking away? So that's really, really powerful when they're in the same room and they can, in the same breakout room, and they can actually just talk about stuff and not feel stigmatized. Like it's a really new experience. Typically, TUI adults come to me for one or two of two reasons, personal fulfillment and professional fulfillment. And all of the things we're talking about stand in the way of that fulfillment. So really, the bottom line message, if somebody said, Julie, you can have one message, and I know you know, Emily, how hard it would be to have just one message, but if I had to have one message, it would be to find self-love. To be able to love yourself, to realize that when you leave the room, you're actually still with you. So it might be a good investment to start liking yourself and being able to be with yourself and rely on yourself, as opposed to working against yourself. That is the most important thing, and certainly my goal with all of my clients.
Yeah. I'm sure that you've seen a lot of success stories, which is always so empowering for people to hear. I'm wondering if you can just share one or two examples of some of the stories you know about Twice Exceptional, either kids or adults, whatever age, but who have been struggling at some point, but you've seen them come out on the other side. And what are the things that help them get to that point?
Oh man, that's such a great question. And there's so many. I'm thinking about a client that started working with me when their child was, I guess, elementary age, and they were homeschooling. And they were stupendously worried about this kid and the way extended family responded and the lack of friendships. And actually, dad and the child really were in a place that was just not positive. Lovely, lovely parents who just wanted the best for their kids so badly, but just didn't know what to do. You know, hope springs eternal. We're all raised in the way that we were raised. And if that wasn't functional, then we're doing the same thing. And how do we undo those patterns and processes? So we worked together for quite a while, and then they left, and then they came back when their child was an adolescent. We worked a little bit more together. And the child is extraordinarily involved in, drama at his now public high school, and is, just very self-confident, self-aware. And how did that happen? Because parents had to first figure that out for themselves so they could not sing the song of everybody else in this kid's life and normalize and be okay with and plan ahead, anticipate what this child needed, and then teach the child how to also anticipate and know what was okay and what was not okay. So that's, and that success isn't just the fact that he could then go matriculate, which was at his request, to a public high school, but that he felt very connected and got involved in lots of activities outside of school when he was so introverted and timid when he was younger. My very first adult client came to me because he had read something I written on emotional overexcitability. And he was like, oh my gosh, you're the only person who's ever understood me. And he said, in quotes, I'm killing my wife, meaning I'm such a horrible, terrible, awful person that I'm very impossible for my wife. And in our deep work together, we identified that actually he wasn't killing his wife. His wife was a little bit killing him. She wasn't understanding. She personalized. Anyway, fast forward a couple of years later, and thankfully in that case, he was able to gracefully bow out of a very toxic relationship and has now developed a really healthy relationship with somebody else. And not that that's my goal, but that's what he needed. And he actually had, what I am so proud of about that client is that he pivoted from this deep sort of self-hate. He was trying so hard. He did like every single program you could possibly do. He did all these things, and he pivoted to see who he is and why, and then to thoughtfully do a cost-benefit analysis of the intensities that he had in various environments and how he could stay loyal to those things and his organic self, but also make an informed choice of whether he could dial up or dial down.
Yeah, having that self-awareness is so key.
Huge.
We've talked a little bit about some different types of strengths-based support throughout. I think just kind of recognizing how to build on the inherent strengths of twice exceptional people. I'm wondering, actually, if you can just even maybe give a more specific definition of what strengths-based supports really are and how we can implement them or find ways to leverage those strengths, whether at home or at school with twice exceptional young people.
So a strength-based approach at the bottom line means identifying and using the inherent abilities of a person, acknowledging them, addressing them, and utilizing them in a way that allows them to then approach a challenge utilizing their incredible tools in their toolbox. So I couldn't repeat that for you because I just made that up. But an example might be incredibly avid reader who has written expression disorder and dysgraphia, rather than the typical song that is, in order to learn how to write, you must write. Instead, if this incredible reader is also a visual thinker, allowing them to figure out a way that they want to express or answer the question that is posed to them, whether it's via creating slides or a video. Oftentimes we'll say, well, you can't do the presentation or the slides until you actually write the paper. But truth be told, written expression challenges are often tied up into executive functioning challenges. And those executive functioning challenges mean that you have a bazillion words in your brain, but how do I prioritize? How do I say what first? And oh my gosh, there's so much noise in my head. So I'm just going to say a minimum amount because it's so hard to discern what I should be saying. And it really doesn't imply what the person has in their head. And so whether they speak and have a scribe, or they speak to text, or they create something, the creation, that strength that they have actually dissipates the executive functioning challenges. So another really simple example is, I say this in the book, for morning routine, especially if you have a teenager, they probably have a playlist. And guess what? They've organized that playlist using some serious executive functions. So why not create the morning routine playlist? So we know when this song switches to this song, now it's time for me to go in and brush my teeth and do my self-care. And when it switches to this song, I know I need to go downstairs or whatever. Just using things that it doesn't even have to be a strength. It can be a passion that you're passionate about. Now, backing up and doing the 30,000 foot view, I actually have an approach. There are actually 200 pages of strategies in the book, and they're based on this acronym that I trademarked, which is PRAISE, which stands for 6 categories of strategies that I teach. And they are personal connection. How do I make a personal connection with this kid who maybe, like that dad I just shared about, doesn't really have a great relationship right now? What are the ways to actually make a strong personal connection with a 2E kid that are most effective? Reframe. How do I reframe? How do I look beyond the behavior? Anticipate. I promise you, everybody in this room, in this virtual room who's listening, you can anticipate where it's hard for your child. You can also anticipate where it's beautiful for your child. So let's use that information. And instead of doing today what didn't work yesterday, tomorrow, let's try something different based on this anticipating. And then incentives and choices, sense of humor, and exercise. So those are my strength-based categories of strategies that I teach.
Julie, I know that we could sit here and talk about this all day long, but this brings us to my final question. If you were talking to a parent who is at the beginning of navigating this journey with their child, what is it that you would want them to hear? And what do you think would help them as they begin this process?
Yeah, so really powerful. And I'm getting full body chills. So there's somebody listening, Emily, who needs to hear this. You are the expert on your kid. So when you have self-doubt, That's okay, just like it's okay when your kid has self-doubt. But we have to work through that with grace, and you have to take the things that you know, and you have to think about what's important to you and why. If conformity is not important to you, or having your child have to like slug through the day, listen to that voice. Listen to that voice. And with everything your child does, I have this fantasy keynote that I want to give one day where I'm just not going to even write anything or have anything prepared. I'm just going to walk through the audience and be like, give it to me. Tell me the hardest thing your kid did, and I'm going to positively reframe it for you. Like, everything can be reframed. Everything. They are working harder. They're not working not as hard. They're working harder to get where they're going and where they are right now. Recognizing that your child is making enormous efforts to meet the expectations, which, by the way, you can say 1,000 times or one time, they know. That is so important to recognize their efforts and to pause and to remember. I know you said one thing, but there's never one thing. And to remember that the timeline, the trajectory is much different for our beautiful neurodiverse kiddos, that the timeline is going to be extended. And so it might be hard to see in the moment the growth that's occurring, but stay the course of positive reframe, strength-based approach, trusting your gut, and loving your kid.
Julie Skolnick, author of Gifted and Distractible. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks, Emily.
When people are neurodivergent, it is part of their daily lives. When we're children, our interactions with parents and teachers can either be understood and supported, or we can receive the message that there's something wrong with us. For people who are also bright, the message that they are valued for their intelligence beyond other characteristics can also seep into their self-perception. And when layered with an unrecognized need or disability, can cause intense frustration and difficulty. The individual nuances that go along with each different neurotype can be tricky to tease out, but the time we spend investigating ourselves or those in our lives, the better equipped we all are to create the neurodiversity affirming world we desire. I'm Emily Kircher-Morris. I'll see you next time on the Neurodiversity Podcast.
This episode is brought to you by the Gifted Learning Lab, which provides resources and coaching for parents who want to feel more confident raising their intense or sensitive, gifted, or twice-exceptional kid, or kids in our case. Thanks to Julie Skolnick. If you want more information about her, there are links in the show notes. Also, remember that we're helping out with a study involving gifted women ADHDers. If that's you, or if it sounds like someone you know, you can get in touch with Jessica Williams through the link in the show notes. Our host is Emily Kircher-Morris. Our office manager and social media director is Krista Brown. I'm the executive producer, Dave Morris. For all of us, thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. This is a service of the Neurodiversity Alliance.